Hi, community. Welcome back to another episode of Allie's Takes. I'm really happy to be here with you today. Thank you for joining me. And thank you for the comments on previous videos. They really mean a lot to me. I love reading them. And I'm really happy that some of this content is helpful. So thank you so much for sharing your comments. So, today, what we're going to talk about is breaking free from the sleep med struggle. And this is maybe a little bit of a divisive topic, definitely controversial. And so, I'm going to start this episode with a big old disclaimer that this is not medical advice. None of what I say today should be taken as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. So please consult with your doctor for any medication questions or changes or ending a medication or anything like that. I'm going to be sharing today my experience with the sleep meds, and I am going to be doing that in the hopes that it can help you on your journey through recovery. And I thought that it was pretty timely because just last week, actually, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I was a guest on Coach Beth's podcast, Mind, Body, Sleep, which is an absolutely amazing podcast. I totally recommend you check it out. And we had this same conversation, very similar conversation that we're going to have today. And it is actually the same by the same name on her podcast, Breaking Free from the Sleep Med Struggle. So I'm going to share a little bit different. That was more interview style. This is more class style, but it's going to be some good information. And I hope that you find it helpful. So we're going to go right into the content today. And our first point that we want to make here is how the fear of meds is yet another fear to meet in the recovery journey. So, when I was in the throes of insomnia, I remember telling my therapist, I was working with a therapist as well at the time, that I was terrified of two things. One, not sleeping, but I was equally terrified of the meds. And in the beginning, however, the fear of the sleeplessness superseded the fear of the meds. And I really tried so many different meds. I think I tried them all. I was very conflicted about this, as I'd always been a little bit maybe anti med, and I was more alternative health minded. And I had so many long held beliefs like they are bad for me. I'm weak, bad, or wrong if I take this med. I'm wrong for needing that kind of support. I'm afraid of addiction or withdrawal or dependency. I should be strong enough to handle this without a med. I'm impeding my progress if I take a med. And the list goes on. And some of these might sound really familiar to you. But as it turns out, none of these beliefs were actually true. And they were all fear based, right? They were all based on fears. And my journey of recovery was really about facing all of these fears, and every speed bump shed light on yet another hidden fear, something sleep related fear that I had not dealt with. And the fear of meds was absolutely one of them because I had so much inner conflict about taking the meds. It created a lot of pressure, anxiety, and worry. I was literally fighting against them and then frustrated when they didn't work. But of course they wouldn't when I was resisting them every step of the way. Now, you can maybe hear in this how the fear of meds is really the same as all the other fears that we encounter around sleep in our recovery journey. The fear of sleeplessness, or the fear of anxiety, or the fear of how we're going to feel the next day after a hard night, or the fear of fear itself. The list goes on. All of these fears around sleep are keeping the fear program running in our brain and the hyperarousal high. And we meet all of these fears in essentially the same way. At their core, These fears can represent long held beliefs, right? That we've held for decades. And they're just simply not true. Most of these beliefs that we've held to be true, that we've put a stake in and said, this is true for me. If we really look at it and we really ask that question, it turns out most of them are not true. And so, what happened for me, so I recognized eventually that these long held beliefs were not true. So, I want to give you an example. So, one example would be when we have these long held beliefs about how much we value sleep, how much sleep we need and should have, and all the bad things that will happen or that we believe will happen if we don't get this. And we know through education and this program, the Sleep Coach School's education, that we really can do actually quite well on very little sleep. We've evolved as a species to live on very little sleep. Our brain has evolved to be able to live on that, on very little sleep. And also, it's not a life-threatening experience. That's a very important point too. The body will always get the minimum amount of sleep required for survival. So we meet the fear of sleeplessness by showing the brain through our actions that it is okay to be awake. It is okay if we are awake. We are safe and we can function even with little sleep. We meet all these fears in a similar way by questioning the validity of these long held beliefs that are really keeping us stuck. We unintentionally give our fears power over us. And when we can become aware of this, we can see that it's no longer serving us to do that. And that these beliefs that we've held for so long are just no longer serving us. So, point number two, we're going to go to now, why meds don't have to be the enemy of recovery. So, facing the fear of the meds was one of the last pieces of the puzzle to fall in place for me. And it was toward the end of my recovery journey. During one of my last speed bumps, I found I really wanted to take a med as a way of supporting myself and to find more ease in the recovery process. I decided at that point, once and for all, to confront the false beliefs, creating this fear that was keeping me conflicted about the meds. And as I did that, and I saw that all of those beliefs were false, they weren't true, and this belief system began to unravel. And once that happened, the fear of the meds no longer had any power over me. I was no longer afraid of them. I could take them or I could not take them. It said nothing about my value as a human being, either way. And it just didn't matter. Not surprisingly, once I was no longer fighting against them, they worked quite well. They helped in my recovery rather than hinder it. Belief is so powerful, and narratives can keep us stuck. So it's okay to question the validity of those beliefs, see where they're keeping you stuck, unravel that, and let it go. Let those beliefs go. They're no longer serving us. So, moving right along here, the third point that I want to make is why it's not the med, but it's how we feel about them that matters. So, the med has always been neutral in this whole process. It's the experience of wakefulness, even that's neutral in this whole process, right? It's the meaning we've assigned to these things that causes the suffering. It is not inherently dangerous to be awake at night. We know that's not a life threatening experience. Millions of people take a sleep med every single night, have no issue with it. But if we have a conflict, if it's not okay with us, then it becomes an issue, and it almost becomes something that takes on an energy all its own as a fear, right? And then this fear has power over us, whether that's the fear of wakefulness, whether that's the fear of a med, whether that's the fear of how we're going to feel the next day, the fear of anxiety, the fear of fear itself, the fear of the sensations, the thoughts, emotions. All of these fears are part of what we face during our recovery process. And they can all be met in the same way that we've already talked about. So, freedom comes from a belief, a fear, an experience no longer having any power or control over us. If we hold on to these long held beliefs about meds, if we demonize them and insist that they are the enemy, we'll never be free of them. And the very last point that I want to make here is that recovery is ultimately about freedom from all fears around sleep. And that freedom, it really feels just about better than anything that I've ever experienced. There's no longer something outside of me that has control over me. There's no longer something I've given the power to inform my experience. So the freedom from all of the fears, and I sometimes call it my bag of fears that I kind of worked through during my recovery process, and there were so many of them. And as I dealt with each of those fears along the way, it got, easier and easier. And this was one of them for me. So I hope that you got some good information here that might assist you and help you in your recovery journey. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I really appreciate you tuning in today. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being here. And I wish you the very best on your recovery journey. Thank you.
Hi, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I hope you found the video you just saw full of inspirational content and full of educational content as well, because that's really what we try to do here in the school. We try to educate and inspire. And if you're finding that things are clicking for you and sleep is happening easier and you're leaving the struggle, please let us know in the comment section, because we live for that. We live for hearing how somebody is finding sleep and life becoming lighter and easier. And not only are you doing us a huge favor as sleep coaches and filling our tank with that gas that makes us never want to stop doing this, but you're also helping the community. You're helping by inspiring other people, and by commenting, you're telling YouTube that this was interesting, and YouTube feeds our content to more people so that they can discover our teachings and things get easier for them. So again, if you found things getting easier for you, please let us know in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you.